Tonight, Joe Biden, the Democratic frontrunner who could challenge the president in 2020, we'll see, is not getting much of an assist from his former presidential running mate, Barack Obama. According to Politico, the former president says, quote, has pointed out that during his own 2008 campaign, he had an intimate bond with the electorate, especially in Iowa, that he no longer has. Then he added, and you know who really doesn't have it? Joe Biden. Well, I'm joined now by Karl Rove, former Deputy Chief of Staff, of course, to President George W. Bush, Fox News contributor, and Juan Williams, co-host of The Five and a Fox News political analyst. Gentlemen, thanks for coming in.
Good to be with you, Ed.
Karl, what do you make of Barack Obama saying, I had it in 2008, Joe Biden doesn't have it?
Well, first of all, we got to take this report with a little bit of grain of salt because we're relying upon supposedly comments that President Obama made in private conversations and off the record. But it does seem that there might be something to it because, yes, Barack Obama did have, as a candidate in 2008, a incredible relationship with Iowa voters that vaulted him into this surprise victory, gave a dramatic speech at the Jefferson-Jackson Day dinner, and he had a gigantic organization that was able to take the enthusiasm that engendered and a few weeks later bring him a surprising victory. And Joe Biden doesn't seem to have the same magic. The other thing is that the Obama people don't seem to have rallied around Joe Biden as you would expect them. They're sort of fragmented. They're all across. Biden has gotten some good endorsements from Obama administration figures like former Iowa Governor Vilsack, but the Obama team is everywhere across the field, and you don't get the sense that there's a lot of love and enthusiasm for Joe Biden as a candidate. Maybe it's because they don't think he can get it across the line. Yeah. Maybe it's because they don't agree with him, or maybe it's because they dealt with him in the Obama administration, and while they have a great deal of affection for him, don't think he has what it takes to be a presidential candidate and a victor.
Juan, what about that? Karl makes the case that Joe Biden doesn't have a lot of enthusiasm out there. We're about to go to a rally live where the president certainly seems like he has a lot of enthusiasm despite impeachment, maybe because of impeachment, because his side is fired up.
Well, I think the other side's fired up, too. 50% of Americans, a majority of Americans, think he should not only be impeached but removed. But to get back to what Karl and you were talking about, Ed, you know, I think Karl is right to say, let's take this with a grain of salt. This is not an on-the-record comment. But to get to the heart of it, the reason that some people might believe it is that Joe Biden is not a showman. He has not come across as some kind of performer. In fact, I think Joe Biden's principal political asset is that he has a certain authenticity. People find him highly relatable, Uncle Joe and all the like. And I would say this about the Obama comment. In my experience, Barack Obama is the ultimate political pragmatist. And if you look at this from purely pragmatic terms about who can defeat Donald Trump and look at the polls today, you would see that among the Democrats, not only is Joe Biden leading nationally by 10-plus points in the latest Real Clear Politics average of polls, but directly against President Trump, he has the highest percentage edge against Trump. So I think that people may, and especially the donor class in New York City, Wall Street guys, they're nervous. They're worried. Can Joe Biden do it? He stumbles on the debate stage. Sometimes he looks rather feeble. All that, I hear all of this. But the reality is that for all the talk, for all the insinuations about something that clearly was not illegal, but that happened with his son Hunter in Ukraine.
Well, we don't know since it hasn't been investigated, Juan.
It has been investigated. Nothing's ever been found. My point to you is nothing. And all the beating up of Joe Biden, and he's still leading in the polls.
Karl, I see you shaking your head. I'm not aware of a federal investigation of Burisma, but maybe I missed it.
No, not a
federal.
Well,
look, I would say two things. One is I noticed my friend Juan did not answer your question about why is Barack Obama expressing unenthusiastic views about Joe Biden. He danced around the question. It's a reality. President Obama has not endorsed his vice president for the nomination, nor is he expressing enthusiasm for him. But the thing that gets me is, okay, yeah, Juan, I'm glad to know that you're in favor of the son of a vice president of the United States with no experience in Ukraine and no experience in the natural gas business being hired for $50,000 a month by a corrupt oligarch in order to send a message to the government authorities in Kiev. Don't mess with me because I got the son of the vice president of the United States on my board, and I got a longtime political factotum of the U.S. Secretary of State on my board. So don't mess with me because I got juice in Washington. and while there may be nothing illegal about it,
let's
stinks.
give Juan a quick chance to respond to that. The president's about to walk out. Juan, you got a quick minute.
I'll just quickly say, Karl and I both share meager upbringings. We didn't have fathers who could do that, but I don't think there's anything illegal about having a rich, famous dad.
Well, there's nothing illegal about that, but I think to Karl's point, we simply don't know how he got this position, Hunter Biden, and his father. Hang on,
we know why he got. We know how he got it. He's the vice president's son, and they wanted political protection in Kiev.
But that's not
they wanted
illegal,
to say
Karl.
we're in with the United States of America.
Right.
In America, the sons of the rich get this every day.
It's stinky and it's corrupt.
Yeah,
it's
I think a lot of rich guys. I can think of one in the White House got help from his dad.
He got help and then built his empire on his own.
Yeah,
Juan.
with bankruptcies and tax loopholes.
Well, I don't think he personally filed for bankruptcy, but the point is, Joe Biden was overseeing Ukrainian policy for Barack Obama while his son was raking in this money. You're not troubled by that, Juan?
I am. I don't like it. I think nepotism is wrong, and I couldn't tell you how wrong I think it is. But the difference between the appearance of impropriety and actual criminal activity, and the president suggests that there was something criminal here. That's just wrong, and it's, again, taking us away from the reality that he's the one being impeached.
All right, Karl, I wonder as well, I teed up a moment ago that Mark Penn had met with the president in recent days. He's about to speak, but maybe we'll get a quick minute in here. Mark Penn's advice was, Mr. President, go out there and govern like Bill Clinton did during impeachment, but also rally the people. That's what he's doing in Florida tonight, isn't he?
Well, he's rallying the people, but the other part of it, if that was Penn's advice, is good advice. One of the things that helped stabilize Bill Clinton in the impeachment crisis of 1997, 1998 was that he came across as somebody who is deeply concerned and actively involved in making the country better and pursuing policy changes that would do so. And I think President Trump would be well advised to talk less about the impeachment process and more about what his vision is for the country, particularly a vision for a second term. It served Clinton well. It would serve President Trump well as well.
Juan, let's let one other element, which is Michael Bloomberg, who got into this race saying that he wants to drive Donald Trump out of office, that we can't afford another 4 years. How does he play in all this on the Democratic side?
Well, it's kind of tough to be a billionaire. I think we'd have three billionaires, right? We got Trump, we got Bloomberg, and we got Tom Steyer. And the question is, in a populist political moment, can anyone support a billionaire? We're going to find out.
Let's listen to the president. Gentlemen, stand by.